morning and welcome. My name is Bailey with Harvest Helper. Today I'm here with Tony Ives of Northwest Pearl. Tony, can you introduce yourself for our audience?
Hey, thanks Bailey. My name is Tony Ives and I'm with Northwest Pearl. I'm the CEO and managing partner of Northwest Pearl. We are a I-502 regulated producer processor in the state of Washington. We've been in business for about 4 years.
Thanks for being with us. I just have a couple questions for you today. I'm trying to highlight for my viewers, how does cannabis testing work in Washington State for a licensed cannabis producer processor?
Okay, just to preempt that question, you know, I'm not a scientist, right?
I know.
I'm a finance guy.
That's right.
And if my partner Billy was here, he'd talk to you all about the statistical.
We're going to track him down
statistical
for
references
the
to
next
testing.
segment.
But and testing has changed, so I will give you that answer from my point of view. Okay. So there is a lot size that we have to submit for testing to the lab, and we've used a few labs around Washington State, but generally we stick with one lab because of consistency, and we want to make sure things are right. So the lab test for THC, THCA, and that's a formula based on weight, frankly, and some other things. They test for potency, as I just said, moisture, foreign matter, microbial, and then mycotoxin screening, and then residual solvents. There are some things they don't test for, maybe some illegal pesticides because there are additional costs, and unfortunately it's a detriment to what we try to do. But the cost is so prohibitive for folks like us.
To have a regular pesticide testing on each lot.
Yes, so what's
so it's left up to the state?
Yeah, that's what I was just about to say. California is just starting to require full-blown testing since they just became regulated, and it's become a shock to producer processors.
The expense.
The expense.
And the standard, or just the expense?
Well, the standards are still trying to figure out. A lot of the new states coming into the regulated market are looking to, I don't want to say mature states, but maturing states that already are doing testing and are already regulated to see what the pitfalls are and what the benefits are.
Okay.
Okay. So one thing I do want to mention though, everybody, since the beginning of I-502, before it was regulated, there wasn't a lot of testing for good and for bad. So since it became I-502, there's been a tremendous focus on high THC.
Huge. When I walk into a retail store in Washington State, not as much in Oregon, but in Washington State specifically, a lot of times the bud tender makes reference to the THC level in the product.
Or frankly, the customer will walk in and say, give me your highest THC product.
Right, because the customer doesn't know.
But that's not necessarily the be-all, the end-all of the quality of the product. Actually, it's not at all. Mm-hmm. You can get a better effect from even a lower THC product, 14%, versus a 30% THC product. And people don't quite understand that yet. And what I've seen on the positive side of that are a lot of bud tenders are now starting to quantify that and talk to the consumer about that.
About cannabinoids and terpene profiles.
That's exactly right, especially the terpene profile, because that can affect you equally or much more than a high THC product. Yeah. So.
Okay, great.
I'll take that a little further. So I was really speaking to the flowers and the flower lot for THC, but just even take it a little further for an infused product. So we make a product called a Jeffrey, and that has flour, crushed flour, infused with our bubble hash rosin and our keef.
Stems removed, which is a huge...
Let's talk about that. Mm-hmm. So, as I mentioned before, the THC, THCA, it's based on weight. That's part of it. That's part of a formula. Mm-hmm. So, let's say that there is one stem or a seed casing. So it affects weight, which diminishes the THC. So the flour could be 25%.
As well as the rest of the cannabinoid readings.
That's
correct?
exactly right. That's exactly right. So the product in itself, the individual components can be much higher than the total. So the flour can be 25%, the rosin can be 90, the kief can be 50, and yet this product comes out much lower. Let's just call it 20%. Why is that? It's very confusing. Well, because they test the paper, the weight of the paper, the stem, and anything else that's involved in the product. And so the paper, of course, it's got the rosin on it, the kief, and everything else involved. Okay?
Right.
So it's confusing.
It is confusing. So, just to clarify, when you take a sample in, are you just taking this in, or are you taking a sample of the rosin and a sample of the kief
We have to
and
test
a
it.
sample of the
We
flour?
have to test everything individually and test it, and then test it together. So we'll test the flour lots, and we'll test the rosin, and then we'll combine it all together after that, and then test the product, the infused product.
So okay, so,
So we
it's up to you to kind of make sure checks and balances are going on.
It is up to
with
us.
your
Right. That's
readings
exactly
from the
right.
labs. Because something like a seed case
It could-
or a stem can greatly
It
affect.
could and will affect testing.
Okay. Great. Okay, let's see, what else? How does the testing affect your business on on a financial level, on a consumer level, your relationships with the store? Are sales dictated by testing results?
Somewhat, and then somewhat not. I'll give you an example. We were contacted by a store just a couple of days ago, and I had to explain the testing and how it worked with a Jeffrey. Even though our customers, our consumer base, love the product, right? It doesn't matter what it is. Testing could be 20% or 40%. It still has the same effect. And I had to explain that. And I actually had to explain that we didn't really have control over the lab and how the testing is performed. But most of the time, I'll just speak to flour lots. Stores have told me that they certainly have a hard time selling a 15% flour, even though it's quality, versus a 29% flour. And so people are still looking for high THC, even though that's not quite accurate representation of the industry.
Okay. Wonderful.
But I would ask you to speak to a lab about it.
And we will. We're going to be doing some follow-up with Tony's partner, Billy, who has the background to really clarify a lot of these concepts for you, but as well as a licensed lab to break down how this actually happens from their perspective, what they're going to do in the testing process. Because they do things like bring your moisture down, is that correct?
Moisture content, that's exactly right. So that is a significant part of the test as well. Seriously, you asked me about testing and how it affects our business. Definitely has an economic effect on our business. California's going to find that out pretty soon. And that's why a lot of the industry partners and alliances in California are really paying close attention to how the labs represent the industry. Up here in Washington, we're a little used to it, but it's
costly. What is a test run?
Well,
and how many tests do you have to pay for each?
For a normal lot, anywhere from $80 to $100. Plus, that includes rosin as well, because they do microbial testing for rosin. And then for our infused product, there's another 40. And we have to submit 4 grams for flour lot and 4 grams for rosin as well. Then to Jeffrey's, just to make sure if we want it to be retested. 2 grams, 2 infused products, I should say. Yeah, so it is costly for everybody.
All right, well, thank you for watching, and we'll be doing some follow-up with Billy Ives and a lab here in Washington State.
Good, thanks, Bailey.
Thank you, Tony.
All right.